Here's the uncomfortable truth people avoid saying out loud. If a man is over 50 and has lived alone for a long time, a lot of people don't see stable. They see damaged. They assume he was left behind, that he's hiding sadness, that his independence is a cover story for failure. And that assumption arrives fast, usually from people who can't imagine a man's life having value if it isn't anchored to a relationship. They confuse quiet with emptiness. They confuse routine with decay. They confuse peace with denial. But a man who lives alone isn't automatically lonely. A man who isn't chasing romance isn't automatically bitter. And a man who has built a life that runs clean and steady isn't automatically missing something. Sometimes what looks like isolation from the outside is the first real calm he's had in years. I live alone. I've lived alone for more than a decade, not because I couldn't keep someone, not because I was rejected, not because I'm waiting for the right person to show up and finally give my life meaning. I live alone because this chapter has been the happiest, most productive, and most peaceful period I've ever experienced. That's not a slogan. That's not a coping mechanism. That's lived reality, measured over years, not weeks. My days are built around work that uses my hands and my mind, fixing, building, maintaining, improving, solving real problems with real outcomes. I take care of animals. I keep my space in order. I decide how I spend my energy and what deserves my attention. And here's the part that many people don't know how to handle. Nothing in my day requires emotional negotiation. No constant interpreting. No managing another adult's moods. No walking on eggshells. No, we need to talk. Hanging over a quiet evening like a threat. No pressure to perform feelings on command to prove I'm committed. My decisions stay small. My mornings are predictable. My home is stable. My life runs with fewer leaks. And a man who has finally experienced that kind of internal order is not easily talked out of it. Now let's get something straight before anyone starts filling in the usual story. This isn't retreat. This isn't fear. This isn't resentment. This isn't a man giving up. This is a conscious choice made after experience, not before it. A man who chooses solitude after years of relationships isn't failing. He's refining. He's choosing efficiency over noise, clarity over confusion, autonomy over constant compromise. He's no longer willing to trade his peace for a role he doesn't fit. Because that's the truth nobody likes to admit. Some men do not thrive inside the modern model of partnership. Not because they're bad men, not because women are bad women, but because the reality of day-to-day compatibility is rarer than people pretend. And once you see that clearly, you stop performing. You stop forcing. You stop pretending that endurance equals maturity. You start telling the truth. I didn't arrive at this life untouched. I didn't arrive by accident. I didn't arrive because I never tried. I was married twice. I divorced twice. And that fact alone makes some people uncomfortable because it breaks the fantasy that love is simply a matter of trying hard enough, choosing correctly once, and then coasting into forever. Real life is not built on fantasies. Real life is built on patterns. And if you're honest, patterns don't lie. After my second divorce, I did what a lot of men do. I went through the phase that looks like living from the outside. Late nights, new faces, casual connections, novelty, validation, attention, the appearance of freedom. On paper, it looked like momentum. On the inside, it was noise. Because attention doesn't equal peace. Variety doesn't equal alignment. And activity doesn't equal progress. If anything, That phase delayed the simplest realization I couldn't escape. Dating more didn't make me understand myself better. It just gave me more examples of what didn't fit. And eventually, you reach a point where you stop blaming the world and you stop blaming the other person and you start asking the only question that matters. What is it about me? And what is it about this setup that keeps producing the same friction? For me, the answer became impossible to ignore. I am not built for long-term emotional negotiation. I don't thrive in environments where peace depends on constant adjustment, where silence is interpreted as distance, where stability requires ongoing emotional labor, where every quiet moment has to be explained, justified, softened, translated, and repackaged so it lands the right way. Some people are wired for that. They find it bonding. They find it meaningful. They feel alive in it. I don't. And here's the thing men need to hear without shame. Admitting that doesn't make you cold. It makes you accurate. A lot of men are told that real maturity means becoming endlessly accommodating. That good men are always available, always responsive, always emotionally fluent, always ready to process, always ready to reassure. That if you don't want to do that for the rest of your life, something must be wrong with you, but maybe nothing is wrong with you. Maybe you function better when your life isn't built around constant interpersonal maintenance. Maybe you are calmer when your home is simple. Maybe you are sharper when your schedule isn't negotiable. Maybe you are more stable when your emotional state is not being pulled in five directions by another person's needs, fears, expectations, and interpretations. That doesn't make connection bad. It makes fit important. And compatibility isn't a moral issue. It's a structural issue. After my second marriage ended, the real shift didn't happen during a dramatic decision. It happened quietly. I changed my environment. I changed my rhythm. And without making an announcement, without declaring a new identity, I stopped dating. Not paused, not taking a break. Stopped. And what surprised me most was how quickly life got smoother. Not emptier, smoother. My schedule stopped bending around someone else's moods and availability. My energy stopped leaking into conversations that went nowhere. I no longer had to explain my boundaries or soften my words to avoid reactions I didn't have the time or appetite to manage. The background noise disappeared. And men, you know what I mean by background noise? The low-grade tension that sits under everything when you're involved with someone who needs constant engagement. The sense that you're never fully off duty. The feeling that you can't just exist. You have to perform. Once you experience days without that drag, it becomes difficult to justify reintroducing it. Because the truth is, many men don't stop dating because they can't. Many men stop because the cost-benefit equation no longer makes sense, especially later in life. Dating after 50 is often framed like an adventure, a second chance, a fun new era. For a lot of men, it feels like work with unpredictable penalties. You're expected to adapt constantly, to demonstrate attentiveness in a very specific style, to absorb insecurity, to provide reassurance, to participate in rituals that don't match how you actually live. And sometimes you're doing all of that while also being evaluated, compared, tested, and questioned like you're on trial. Meanwhile, you're thinking, I already have a peaceful life. I already have order. I already have momentum. So you start asking a serious question. What exactly am I gaining that I cannot create for myself? And when the honest answer is not much, walking away isn't pessimism. It's rational. What replaced dating wasn't a void. It was balance. I slept better. I worked more consistently. My mind got quieter. My body responded. Stress dropped. My patience returned. That isn't coincidence. That's what happens when you remove chronic friction from a man's life. Here's another truth. Being alone doesn't automatically mean being isolated. It means your emotional state is no longer outsourced. When you're single by choice, your baseline becomes neutral instead of reactive. You stop chasing highs. You stop bracing for conflict. You stop interpreting every interaction like it's a referendum on your worth. You just live. And for men especially, that neutrality is power. It sharpens focus. It restores discipline. It reduces impulsive decisions. It gives you time to build instead of constantly resetting. Now, let's talk about something people avoid because it forces honesty. The environment matters. I don't live in the middle of a city where you can swipe through endless options and pretend that choice equals quality. I live outside. Major urban centers, in suburban and semi rural reality, the pool is smaller. But the bigger issue isn't the number of available people, it's alignment. Lifestyle mismatches show up immediately. Routine, health, spending, temperament, expectations around time, expectations around attention, expectations around what a relationship is supposed to look like day to day. And the older you get, the less patience you have for building a life around someone else's unresolved patterns. Here's what a lot of people don't consider. When a man has already built a stable solo life, the bar for letting someone in rises dramatically. Not because he thinks he's better than anyone, not because he's arrogant, because the risk becomes asymmetrical. One wrong relationship can disrupt years of calm. One incompatible partner can drain energy faster than it can be replenished. One chaotic dynamic can dismantle routines that took years to establish. So men stop gambling with their peace. And this is where many people misread men. They label it avoidance. It isn't avoidance, it's evaluation. It's the moment you stop asking, could this work? And start asking, what does this cost me if it doesn't? That's maturity, even if it doesn't sound romantic. Now I'm going to say something that will upset some people because it refuses to flatter anyone. Standards don't disappear with age. They sharpen, and pretending otherwise is dishonest. As you get older, you stop being impressed by presentation. You start paying attention to maintenance. You start looking for evidence of self-respect. You start assessing livability, not fantasy. Livability. For me, that includes health and discipline. I'm not interested in a lifestyle built around denial and excuses. I'm not interested in a future where preventable problems become shared burdens because someone refused to take care of themselves. That isn't cruelty, it's practicality. At this age, health isn't just looks. Health is energy, mobility, mood, sleep, long-term independence. It's whether your life expands or shrinks over the next decade. And yes, attraction matters too. Attraction is not a charitable donation. You don't negotiate your way into it. You don't guilt your way into it. You don't shame someone into feeling what they don't feel. The same goes for authenticity. I'm not interested in a persona. I'm not interested in performance. I'm not interested in the exhausting gap between how someone presents themselves and who they are when the house is quiet. I'm drawn to people who are comfortable in their own skin. People who don't need a constant audience. People who can exist without turning every day into a stage. Because at this stage of life, many men aren't shopping for excitement. They're assessing peace. Can I wake up next to this person without friction? Can I share space without managing insecurity? Can I trust that what I see is what I get? Those are not shallow questions. Those are survival questions. And as standards clarify, options narrow. That's not a tragedy, it's sorting. The more comfortable you become with your own life, the less willing you are to compromise on traits that affect daily reality. That's not bitterness, that's discernment. At some point, a man stops asking what a relationship could add and starts measuring what it could take away. That isn't cynicism, that's accounting. Living alone gives me freedom, but not the reckless kind people associate with youth. The quiet, disciplined kind that makes a life run smoothly. No arguments over tone, no debates about timing, no pressure to justify why I value silence, no concern that is actually control, no subtle power struggles over how I spend my time. I don't have to manage someone else's emotions before I'm allowed to access my own peace. And yes, we should say this plainly, drama doesn't disappear with age. Insecurity, jealousy, resentment, and unresolved history don't magically evaporate at 50. In many cases, they get more entrenched. People become less flexible, less willing to look in the mirror, more likely to demand that someone else carry what they never processed. Removing romance removes an entire category of stress that many men have spent decades tolerating. Then there's financial exposure. Long-term relationships create shared risk, whether people admit it or not. One bad decision, one legal conflict, one emotional spiral, and years of stability can vanish. When you live alone, your effort compounds instead of being redistributed. Your resources stay aligned with your goals. And there's emotional efficiency. I don't have to absorb moods I didn't create. I don't have to carry someone else's dissatisfaction with life. I don't have to become the dumping ground for anxieties that have nothing to do with me. I'm responsible for my own state. That's it. That simplicity creates consistency. Consistency creates momentum. Momentum creates progress. People like to mock men who replace relationships with routines, hobbies, pets, projects. They call it avoidance. But those things offer something many relationships fail to deliver: loyalty without negotiation, presence without pressure, structure without manipulation. My animals don't compete with me. They don't test me. They don't punish silence. They coexist. The result is not emptiness, it's order. And once you experience that level of stability, the question isn't why would you stay alone? The question becomes what exactly would justify giving this up? Now, I'm not going to lie and pretend there are no downsides. Anyone who claims solitude has no cost is either dishonest or selling something. There are disadvantages. There are moments when an extra set of hands would help. Physical tasks don't get easier with age. Carrying heavy things, handling repairs, dealing with injuries. If something needs to be done, it's on me. Self-reliance is real. It's not romantic. There's also the long-term reality people like to use as a threat: illness, decline, death. Yes, I may face some of that alone, but here's what's rarely said. Being partnered does not guarantee care, loyalty, or presence. Commitment is not an insurance policy. Plenty of people discover too late that legal attachment is not the same as genuine devotion. At least solitude doesn't lie about what it offers. So the answer isn't denial. The answer is preparation. I invest in my health. I maintain friendships and community. I stay socially functional without entanglement. I plan financially. I build systems instead of relying on promises. That isn't cold. That's responsibility. Compare that to the hidden costs many men endure inside mismatched relationships: chronic tension, constant conflict, erosion of autonomy, financial strain, and the slow death of respect. Those costs are heavier, harder to reverse, and more damaging over time. So yes, I accept inconvenience in exchange for mental quiet. I accept the reality of doing everything myself in exchange for living without friction. I accept the risk of facing the future alone in exchange for living the present without chaos. That exchange makes sense to me. And what unsettles people is that I'm not asking to be rescued from this choice. I'm not waiting. I'm not secretly hoping circumstances change. I've measured both paths. This one has fewer traps. Now zoom out and look at the story society keeps trying to sell. We're still told that success equals permanent partnership, that ending up alone means something went wrong, that a man without a romantic partner must be incomplete. That narrative comforts people who can't stand their own company. It reassures those who need external validation as proof they're doing life correctly. But the world has changed, and pretending it hasn't only produces more frustrated people recycling the same mistakes. Lifelong marriage is no longer the default outcome for a lot of people. Not because everyone is weaker, because incentives, expectations, and environments have shifted. Many relationships today are built on dependency, social validation, and fear of being alone, not genuine compatibility. So people jump from one connection to the next and call it growth while repeating the same patterns. Motion gets mistaken for progress. Men over 50 tend to see through that faster. Experience teaches cost awareness. We've already paid for bad decisions with time, money, energy, and peace. We know that restarting isn't a neutral gamble. We know what it's like to rebuild after something that didn't fit. We know the price of pretending. That's why the urge to try again fades for many men. Not because we're incapable of love, not because we're broken, because we finally understand the cost of misalignment. This doesn't mean a good relationship is impossible. If true alignment exists, real alignment, not forced compromise, it can be worth it. But the tolerance for mismatch drops to near zero. The fear of solitude disappears. And once the fear is gone, manipulation loses its power. Social pressure loses its bite. Shame stops working. A man who can be alone without collapsing is dangerous to narratives that depend on him needing approval. That's what really rattles people. Not men choosing solitude, but men choosing it calmly, without anger, without apology, without asking permission. It challenges the assumption that a man must always be chasing, proving, fixing, or performing. It reveals something many people don't want to admit. Solitude can be an upgrade, not a punishment. Walking away in this context isn't quitting, it's adapting. It's choosing a structure that supports who you are now, not who you were expected to be. Decades ago, it's deciding that peace is not a luxury, it's a requirement. If this perspective bothers you, let it bother you. Discomfort often shows where the truth is hiding, and if it resonates, you already know why. This isn't about convincing anyone. It's about naming something that more men are quietly choosing every year. It's about normalizing a decision that doesn't need permission. Agree or disagree. Push back or reflect. But stop pretending that a man who chooses to live alone has failed. In many cases, he didn't lose. He did the math, and he acted accordingly.